The Marked Child of Mesopotamia. Part 1, Birth Under the Gods, circa 2000 BC. The city of Ur slept beneath a thin veil of dawn mist. Its mud brick walls glowing faintly under a sky that had not yet chosen day or night. The ziggurat of Nana, Lord of the Moon, towered above the city like a stepped mountain, its shadow stretching across courtyards and narrow streets. In this hour, when dreams still clung to the mind, and omens whispered freely, the child was born. His mother, Ninsen, labored in a small room near the potter's quarter. The walls were rough, the air heavy with clay dust, and incense burned to steady the heart. Outside, a donkey brayed. Somewhere farther off, water lapped against the canal banks. Inside, a midwife murmured prayers learned from her mother, and her mother's mother before her. When the child finally came into the world, he did not cry at once. Silence filled the room, too much silence. Then the midwife gasped. On the child's left shoulder, dark against new skin, lay a mark. It was not a simple blemish or stain. It curved and crossed itself, like a symbol pressed by a knowing hand. The midwife had seen birthmarks before, many of them, but never one like this. Her breath caught as old stories stirred in her memory. Ninsen reached out weakly. "Give him to me." The midwife hesitated. She glanced toward the doorway, half expecting the walls to hear her thoughts. Then she placed the child in Ninsen's arms. As if awakened by touch, the child cried, strong, sharp, alive. Ninsen looked down at him, her exhaustion forgotten. She saw the mark at once. Her fingers trembled. "No," she whispered. "Please. No." The omen. By midday, the room was full. Not of celebration, but of quiet fear. Ninsen's husband, Lugalaru, stood near the door, his arms folded tight against his chest. He was a laborer, strong-backed, calloused hands. A man who knew how to survive but not how to defy fate. His eyes never left the mark on his son's shoulder. An elder woman from the neighborhood arrived first. Then another. Soon, someone had sent for a Baru priest, a diviner trained to read the will of the gods in signs and scars. The priest examined the child carefully, his fingers hovering just above the skin, never quite touching. "This mark," he said at last, "is not of the flesh alone." Ninsen's heart pounded. "What does it mean?" The priest closed his eyes. "In the old tablets, there is mention of children born with the sign of crossing lines. Children marked between paths." Lugalaru swallowed. "Between what paths?" "Power and suffering," the priest replied. "Life and death. Freedom and chains." The room felt smaller. "Such children," the priest continued, "do not belong fully to themselves. The gods place a claim upon them." Ninsen pulled her son closer. "He is just a child." "Yes," said the priest softly. "And that is why the gods mark them early. A name chosen carefully. They named him Aru. Not for a god, nor for a king, but for clay, the substance from which humans were said to be shaped." Ninsen insisted on the name, hoping it would keep him humble, unnoticed, safe. For a time, it seemed to work. Aru grew quickly, a quiet child with observant eyes. He watched more than he spoke. When other children chased dogs through the streets or wrestled in the dust, Aru sat near the canal, tracing patterns in the mud with a stick. The mark remained. As he grew, it darkened slightly, its lines more defined. Sometimes Ninsen thought it looked like a broken chain. Other times, like a gate. She covered it whenever she could. But Ur was not a city that forgot. Whispers in the streets. Children noticed first. "Show us," they would say. The mark. When Aru refused, they would pull at his tunic or shove him until he stumbled. One boy, older and crueler than the rest, once pressed his thumb hard against the mark. Aru screamed, not from pain, but from something deeper. Something like a sudden rush of cold water through his veins. That night, he dreamed of fire and stone, of walls falling and rising again. Ninsen began to fear sleep. Neighbors whispered. Merchants spoke in low voices as Aru passed their stalls. A woman once spat on the ground and murmured a prayer when she saw him. Marked, they said. God touched. God cursed. Lugaluru tried to ignore it. People fear what they don't understand, he told Ninsen. It will pass. But fear, once fed, does not starve easily. The law of debt. The year the harvest failed, everything changed. The canals ran low. The barley heads were thin. Grain prices rose like floodwater. And those without silver or surplus were swept under. Lugaluru borrowed to survive. First from a merchant. Then from a temple agent. Each loan came with seals pressed into clay tablets, marks of obligation. Heavier than stone. When Lugaluru injured his back hauling bricks for a new storehouse, he could no longer work. The debts remained. One morning, officials came to the house. They wore clean linen and carried tablets under their arms. Their voices were calm, almost kind. The law allows repayment through service, one said. Temporary servitude. Ninsen understood before they finished speaking. No, she said. Take me. The man shook his head. The boy. Aru stood in the doorway, small and thin, listening. The marked one, the man added quietly. The last morning. On the final morning, Ninsen washed Aru carefully. She tied a cord around his wrist, pressed a small clay charm into his palm. For protection, she said, though her voice broke. Aru looked up at her. Am I bad? No, she said fiercely. You are alive. That is never bad. Lugaluru knelt before his son and placed his hands on Aru's shoulders. Careful not to touch the mark. Listen, he said. Observe. Remember. Survive. Aru nodded, though he did not fully understand. As they led him away, the city of Uar continued its morning rhythm, vendors calling. Donkeys groaning, priests chanting. Life did not stop for one child. But as Aru crossed the threshold, he felt something shift within him. Like a door closing or opening. The mark on his shoulder burned, just for a moment. High above, the ziggurat caught the full light of the rising sun. And somewhere, unseen and uncaring, the gods watched. The road away from Uar was not long, but to Aru it felt endless. He walked barefoot behind the temple official, dust clinging to his ankles. The cord his mother had tied still tight around his wrist. Each step carried him farther from the only life he had known. He did not cry. Something inside him had already learned that tears were useless in the face of law. They took him to the grain estates of the temple of Nana, where debt servants worked until their value was spent. Children were common there, thin. Silent figures moving between fields, mills, and storehouses. No one asked their names. Aru became the marked boy. Life in service. The overseer, Belilam, was a narrow-eyed man with a reed whip coiled at his belt. On the first day, he inspected Aru like livestock. Small, he said. But strong enough. His gaze lingered on Aru's shoulder. Cover that. From dawn to dusk, Aru worked. He carried water from the canals. Ground grain until his arms shook. Swept courtyards thick with dust and bird droppings. At night, he slept on woven mats with other children. Their ribs sharp beneath their skin. Hunger became a constant companion, quiet, patient, never leaving. Yet Aru learned quickly. He learned where the overseer's eyes did not reach. He learned which guards could be avoided. He learned how to move without being noticed. And he listened. Older servants spoke in whispers after dark, of laws carved in stone. Of kings who rose and fell, of revolts crushed beneath soldiers' sandals. Aru stored every word inside him like grain in a sealed jar. The burning mark. The mark did not fade. Under the sun, it darkened. Sometimes it ached, a dull pressure beneath the skin. Other times, it burned sharply, without warning. One evening, while turning the millstone, Aru collapsed. Pain flared through his shoulder, spreading down his arm. The stone slipped from his grip and shattered a clay bowl nearby. Belilam struck him hard across the back. Get up, cursed thing. As Aru pushed himself to his knees, the pain vanished as suddenly as it had come. That night, Aru dreamed again. He stood before a gate of bronze, its surface etched with the same lines as his mark. Voices spoke from beyond it, too many to understand. Yet familiar, as if they had always been waiting. When he woke, his heart raced, but his mind felt sharper. The scribe's eye. Months passed. Aru grew lean and wiry. His silence made him invisible. That was why Enlilidin, a junior temple scribe, noticed him. Unlike overseers, scribes watched everything. Enlilidin saw how Aru counted sacks without being taught. How he recognized symbols pressed into clay seals. How his eyes lingered on tablets drying in the sun. One afternoon, Enlilidin called him over. "Can you tell the difference?" The scribe asked, pointing to 2 tablets. Aru hesitated, then nodded. He traced one symbol with his finger, then another. "Barley," he said quietly. "And silver." Enlilidin stared. "Who taught you?" "No one." That night, Aru was moved from the mill to the storehouse. It was not kindness. Knowledge made servants more useful. But knowledge also opened doors. A friend in chains. In the storehouse, Aru met Taram. A boy a few years older, with a crooked smile and eyes too old for his face. "Don't let them see how smart you are," Taram warned. "They fear what they can't own." The two worked side by side, stacking grain and sealing jars. At night, they spoke of escape, softly. Carefully, knowing such dreams were dangerous. "Do you believe in destiny?" Taram asked once. Aru touched his shoulder unconsciously. "I think. Something believes in me." Taram laughed, but uneasily. "Blood and law." The day Taram tried to steal a handful of grain, the law answered swiftly. Belilam dragged him into the courtyard. Guards watched without expression. The whip fell again and again. Aru stood frozen, every strike echoing in his chest. When it was over, Taram did not rise. That night, his sleeping mat was gone. By morning, no one spoke his name. Something hardened inside Aru. He understood now, the law did not care about children, or marks, or dreams. It cared only for order. And order could be broken. The first choice. Weeks later, fire broke out in the western storehouse. Panic spread. Guards shouted. Smoke filled the air. Aru saw his chance. He could run. The gate was open. Chaos covered everything. But he also saw something else, a trapped child. Younger than him, coughing near the flames. The mark burned. Aru turned back. He dragged the child free just as the roof collapsed behind them. By morning, the temple praised the overseers. The child was returned to work. No one thanked Aru. Yet something had changed. Enlilidin watched him differently now. So did others. And deep within Aru, the voices whispered again, quiet, approving. The marked child had made his first choice. And the gods had noticed. The fire changed everything. Though no one spoke Aru's name in praise. Whispers moved through the grain estates like wind through reeds. Guards watched him more closely. Servants stepped aside when he passed. Even Belilam's eyes lingered on him longer than before, uncertain, calculating. Aru felt it too. Something inside him had awakened. Lessons written in clay. Enlilidin summoned Aru more often now. At first, it was simple tasks, carrying tablets. Sorting seals, standing quietly while numbers were spoken aloud. But soon, the scribe began to teach him, though he never called it that. "This mark," Enlilidin said one evening. Nodding toward Aru's shoulder. "The elders say it is dangerous." Aru remained silent. "Dangerous things," the scribe continued. "Pressing symbols into wet clay. Are not always meant to be destroyed. Sometimes they are meant to be used." Under Enlilidin's careful eye, Aru learned to read. He learned how laws were shaped, how debt became chains. How a single seal could turn a free man into property. Each lesson sharpened his understanding of the world, and of his own captivity. Knowledge no longer frightened him. It fueled him. Dreams of stone and fire. The dreams returned, stronger than before. Aru saw cities crumble and rise again. He saw kings kneel before faceless crowds. He saw chains snap, not all at once, but link by link. Sometimes, he woke with words on his lips, ancient and unfamiliar. Other servants began to notice strange things. Locks loosened when Aru passed. Numbers were miscounted, always in favor of the weak. An overseer tripped and fell just as he raised his whip. They whispered that the marked boy was God-walked. Belilam heard those whispers. The breaking point. The order came at dawn. Belilam accused Aru of tampering with records, an offense punishable by mutilation or death. The accusation was false, but truth held no weight here. They dragged Aru into the courtyard. Enlilidin stood at the edge, pale and silent. He did not intervene. Scribe survived by obedience. As the guards forced Aru to his knees, the mark burned hotter than ever before. Pain spread through his chest, not weakening him, but strengthening him. When the whip struck, it snapped. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Belilam reached for his dagger. Aru stood. For the first time, he did not lower his eyes. The ground beneath them trembled, just slightly, but enough. The guards hesitated. Fear, once learned, spreads quickly. Flight through the city. Chaos followed. Aru ran. Through alleys and markets, past temples and canals, the city blurring around him. He felt the city's pulse beneath his feet, as if the clay itself remembered him. Soldiers shouted. Horns sounded. At the riverbank, Aru leapt onto a cargo raft and pushed off with bare hands. Arrows struck the water behind him. As the current carried him away, the mark cooled, leaving only a deep, steady warmth. Uar receded into the distance. For the first time, Aru was no one's property. The world beyond. Freedom was not kind. Aru wandered through villages and fields. Sleeping under open skies, trading labor for food. Hunger returned, but it was different now, sharpened by purpose. In the ruins of an old settlement, he met others like himself. Runaways. Debt slaves. Broken soldiers. They followed him without being told. Not because he commanded, but because he understood. He spoke of laws that could be rewritten. Of chains that were made by men and could be unmade by men. His words carried weight, as if shaped by something older than speech. The mark glowed faintly at night. A name spoken softly. One evening, an old woman approached their fire. "You are the child from Uar," she said. The marked one. Aru did not deny it. "The gods do not mark without reason," she said. "But remember, what they give, they also demand." Aru stared into the flames. "I will not serve them blindly," he said. The woman smiled sadly. "Then your path will be hard." Aru nodded. Hard paths no longer frightened him. The marked child had escaped his chains. But freedom was only the beginning. Ahead waited kings, armies. And the final test of whether destiny could be challenged, or only fulfilled. The group grew slowly. They did not call themselves rebels, nor did they carry banners or oaths. They were farmers who had fled debt. Soldiers discarded after wars. Women sold and resold until they ran. Children who had never known freedom long enough to miss it. They followed Aru because he listened. He never promised miracles. He spoke only of choice. And that, in Mesopotamia, was dangerous. The weight of destiny. As months passed, stories spread faster than the group itself. A marked man who broke whips with his bare hands. A boy who read laws better than priests. A leader who refused crowns. In villages, people hid them. In cities, officials searched for them. Aru felt the mark grow heavier, not painful, but demanding. The dreams returned with urgency now. No longer visions of possibility, but warnings. He saw blood in temple courtyards. He saw chains replaced by laws carved deeper than before. He saw himself standing at a crossroads, alone. One night, near the ruins of an old ziggurat, Aru finally spoke aloud. "If you are gods," he said to the darkness, "then speak clearly." The wind rose. The moon emerged from the clouds. And in his mind, not as thunder, but as understanding, came the truth. The mark was never a blessing. It was a test. The choice of the marked. The gods of Mesopotamia did not grant freedom. They measured it. Marked children appeared in times of imbalance, when kings ruled too harshly. When laws crushed more lives than they ordered. The marked were not meant to rule. They were meant to correct. And then disappear. Aru understood what was expected of him. To lead an uprising. To break a city. To spill enough blood to frighten the powerful back into balance. Then to die, remembered as a warning, not a man. He gathered his people at dawn. I will not make you martyrs, he said. I will not trade one chain for another. Some were angry. Some were afraid. But many stayed. Because Aru offered something no god ever had. An end without obedience. The law rewritten. Instead of marching on Aru did something unexpected. He sent tablets. Copies of laws, rewritten in plain language. Proof of illegal debts. Records of temple corruption, seals and Lilidin had once shown him. Now turned against their makers. These tablets appeared in markets, nailed to gates. Read aloud by scribes who could no longer deny the truth. The response was not immediate rebellion, but something more dangerous. Questioning. Merchants hesitated. Officials argued. Judges delayed. Power, once unquestioned, began to crack. The price. The gods did not forgive defiance. One night, soldiers finally found the group. The fight was short and brutal. Aru was wounded protecting a child, another marked one. Younger, newly burned with the same sign. As he lay bleeding beneath the open sky, the mark began to fade. For the first time since his birth, it felt light. The child knelt beside him. Will they mark me forever? Aru smiled weakly. Only until you learn to choose. What remained? Aru died before dawn. There was no monument. No temple. No official record. But the laws of changed quietly in the years that followed. Debt limits were set. Child servitude restricted. Temple accounts inspected more closely. Kings claimed credit. The gods remained silent. And from time to time, when balance tipped too far. When chains grew too heavy. Another child was born with a strange mark upon their skin. Parents whispered in fear. But somewhere, deep in the clay of Mesopotamia, the earth remembered Aru. Not as a servant. Not as a weapon of the gods. But as the one who proved that even destiny could be questioned. End of the full story.